Well, it's a very hot, sweaty day in London, and we're now just a week or two away from going up to Edinburgh to start the shows, and I'm feeling, of course, all that sense of anticipation and fear that one feels when you have a new show that you're launching in that very intense marketplace, which is called the Edinburgh Fringe. And this year I actually have two shows, so I have two premieres on the same day of two very different shows, and twice the levels of stress. I think the only way for me really to deal with this is to try and do away with stress altogether. Try and forget that there is such a thing as worry and stress, and just go on and do what I'm at the moment preparing myself to do. I'm doing two new shows this year, one of which is largely frivolous, which is a sing-along show. It's going to be a musical show with Stuart Nichols at the piano, which is going to be all about community singing, which, even though that seems frivolous, actually I think does have a very serious philosophical undertone to it, because I really believe that human beings are empowered by singing together, and it's used in many, many areas of life, in politics, religion, of course, church services, in sports, in national anthems, so many ways that are used in order to give an audience a feeling of bonding. And I think as we go into more troubled times economically, and that we're all going to be, I think, feeling the pinch if we're not already, which we are, then it's going to be a sense of community that will help us survive, as has always been the case with human society. Now, the other show I'm doing is very, very different. It's on a very serious subject of enormous emotional import, and it's about, of course, the worst terrorist atrocity that was ever committed on British soil, the bombing of Pan Am Flight 103, which landed on the unfortunate town of Lockerbie. It's probably important to stress that the plane could have gone off. If the bomb had gone off a minute or two earlier, the bomb would have gone off over England, over an English town, northern English town, in which case the legal ramifications would be very different. As it was just over the border and hit the town of Lockerbie and killed 11 people on the ground, 259 people killed on the plane, so a total of 270 people killed in our worst terrorist atrocity. Now, this has become a cause again recently because of politicians mostly raising questions about the release of the man who was convicted of the bombing, Abdul Basit al-Megrahi. The show that I'm doing will look at that subject and will also discuss the evidence that was presented against this Libyan gentleman at the trial and decide whether he was indeed fairly convicted or not. But mostly the show is going to be an exploration of, a telling of the story of one man, the man who has become the most vocal mouthpiece of the UK families, the Lockerbie families, a man called Dr. Jim Swire. This is the man who you generally see interviewed on the news when there is, they need a quote from someone from the UK families. A heroic figure, I think, a man of enormous integrity and courage, and one whose story I think really needs to be told, and which it is a privilege for me to be telling this year. At the end of the 2009 Fringe, there was, of course, a huge furore that erupted because Abdul Basit al-Megrahi was released on compassionate grounds by the Scottish government and sent back to Libya to die of cancer, which, of course, as we know, he has not yet died of. I personally wish him a long life, as long as he can get, really, because I think he was unfairly imprisoned. I think it was a miscarriage of justice, and a blatant one at that. So to me, the great story, the great scandal isn't that he was released, it's that he was imprisoned in the first place, which I think is, when the audience see the laughable evidence on which he was convicted, I think they can do nothing but agree that it was clearly a miscarriage of justice. Now, that story came up in the press and in the media very strongly at the end of last year's festival, when I was finishing my run of a show I was doing about Samuel Johnson, the man who wrote the first English dictionary. And I was doing some research online on the subject of Lockerbie, idly just browsing news stories, and I came across the website of Jim Swire, Dr. Swire, who was the great Lockerbie campaigner, and saw that he had written a book, as yet unpublished, giving his account of what happened to him from the 21st of December 1988 to the present day, written with a co-researcher, Peter Bidoff, and they had a thing saying, leave your email address if you would like to know when the book is published and we'll inform you. So I did, sent him an email, and had a message back very swiftly from Peter Bidoff saying, I see that you're an actor and you write one-man shows, perhaps you'd be interested in having a look at this unpublished text and seeing if there's anything you can do with it. Which I thought, well, that's a huge challenge. It wasn't something that was particularly on my agenda, but I would love to read it anyway. So he sent me a copy of it. I was absolutely transfixed. It's a brilliant account of Dr. Swire's traumatic journey and of his campaign and of his enormous courage and of his anger and grief at the loss of his daughter Flora. Something I think he's never been able to have, as we say, closure with.